Chapter 81. Improvements. In the next 3 years on their journey, the four have been training diligently. Every year they would land on a planet to resupply. Their bodies needed more energy after becoming stronger, so they had to stop on a planet to get more food. Although they could also get on without food and rely on their energy, but that was too exhausting and Saiyans loved their food. It was also their time to get out and see different things other than the inner walls of the ship. Zhangya was already considered as one of theirs. Kana and her especially became good friends, although, or maybe because they used to quarrel all the time. After constant training, they were maxing out on the settings of the rooms. It had been only 5 years since they started training with it, and now it became easier every day. Of course, the effort they took was not small at all. They were constantly on the verge of death and pushed their bodies to their utmost limits. With Broly and his control over life force, hidden injuries were almost impossible. Talking about life force, Broly's growth in it was tremendous. He gained tremendously with his training. His best gains were with the life force pearl. For a long time, it wasn't affected by his efforts. It wasn't affected until his strength increased and became more proficient with his ki. He was able to move it with massive amount of ki, and it also slowly broke the pearl down. He moved it into the place where his ki generated, which took him a few months to do so, but after he was done, the pearl was automatically being corroded by the ki. By doing this, he was able to give his ki life force properties. His ki was able to strengthen his cells, making it unnecessary to use the life force he generated. With the surplus of life force, he could either use it to further strengthen his cells or use it for attacks and for healing purposes. Usually, he would gather his life force into a single point to create a pearl of his own. The pearl he was corroding was built with a foundation of someone else's pearl, and he was unfamiliar with its exact structure, so he thought about beginning from zero. While the pearl broke down inside, he would observe its structure and try to learn from it. He also realized that the life force of the pearl that came from the Black Sun he absorbed was not as easy to be manipulated as his own. His own life force was still the best to use techniques with, and with the already existing pearl, he would use it to strengthen his body step by step. He would store his life force in a single point trying to create a pearl, and if he needed it, he could just use this pearl as a reserve for anything he wanted. There wasn't the problem that he couldn't move it easily. His own life force would listen to him, even when it was almost solid. Now with this surplus, he started to inject it in his other techniques, so they could be strengthened by it, but he quickly realized the problem with this method. The life force was exceptional on its own like the Genkidama, but mixed with ki, it didn't support the techniques at all, making it unnecessary to combine them. He instead picked up a project he had on hold for a long time, burning life force. By burning it, he could boost the strength of his body tremendously, but this wasn't easy to sustain. At the beginning, even when he saved a few months of life force, it would be uncontrollably burn up in just a few seconds. Although his strength would rise tremendously, afterwards his body would go into a weakened state, and with the short burst, it would be almost impossible to fight with it. It was only useful as his final attack. But this didn't stop him from analyzing the process and try to optimize its effect. After 1 year and 7 months of optimizing it, he came up with the perfect balance of strength and the amount of life force he could use. If he only used the life force he generated, he could sustain it endlessly, but it would only boost his strength by 1%. If he used his saved life force of a month and burn it with the highest cost-effect return, he could boost himself 10x for 2 minutes. 2 minutes couldn't be underestimated in high-end battles. Broly was very satisfied with the result, and from then on, he saved his life force for a year, which would sustain him for 24 minutes, which would be long enough to finish a fight. Of course, there was the option to burn it at faster rate, which would boost his strength more, but the load on his body and the rate his life force was being burned was increased exponential. He also has finally mastered his legendary state completely, and his multiplier reached 450x in the end, which was 2.25 times higher than a transformation into Super Saiyan 2. Of course, it couldn't hold its own against someone of the same base strength plus Super Saiyan 3. According to the series, it was 4x times as strong as Super Saiyan 2, which would mean it was an 800x times multiplier to one's base. Broly couldn't help but grin at the thought. If he used his Ikari on top of his mastered legendary state, he would be already close to Super Saiyan 3 with a multiplier of 675x times his base. He was still in his first, normal Super Saiyan, and with new transformations his strength would be immeasurable. In the 3 years of training, he didn't manage to improve a lot with his Ikari, but still with his mastery of Ozaru, his experience with Ikari, and his mastery over his legendary state, he thought that he should be able to go legendary Super Saiyan 4, but he was hesitating. A feeling told him that he was missing something and that it wouldn't end good for him if he tried it anyway. He listened to this feeling and decided to put it on hold for now. He decided to improve his Ikari and reach the other Super Saiyan transformations before he tackled Super Saiyan 4. He knew that he could theoretically skip Super Saiyan 2 and 3 as they were only deviants from the original Super Saiyan, but it would boost his understanding and mastery of Super Saiyan, and he believed this weird feeling would at least vanish by then. In the future, he would concentrate more on the transformations, because he couldn't improve his body by much anymore, or rather the gains weren't worth the time he invested. After Broly had reached the limits of gravity and the other technologies to train him, his progress through training slowed down tremendously at 20 billion. The others could still go on in their base form, and it would last them till they reached Broly's level now. Obviously, he was not the only one who improved. Although Aaliyah and Kana were becoming stronger as well, they were nowhere near to the next level of Super Saiyan, but they had reached 600 million in their base by now. Zangya had made tremendous progress. Now her transformation boosted her 10x times instead of the original 3x, and her base strength increased rapidly as well. It had reached 3 billion, compared to her original 700 million. The increase was a lot, to say the least. They were happy to see their strength improve so fast. On the other hand, Broly of course was dissatisfied with his slowed down progress, but his mood had improved after seeing the blue planet in the window. According to the map, the next origin crystal awaited him there. The Origin's energy crystal, what abilities would he gain from it? He couldn't help but want to quickly find out. Of course, there was the possibility that he wouldn't gain any ability at all, but it would be beneficial no matter what. On Perditus they used normal energy crystals to feed the Tree of Might, which should mean that inside was life force, but the Origin's blood crystal already kept life force inside, so it had to be another potent energy source, which the tree could absorb. He was getting excited to find out what it was. Broly dressed up in his battle armor with the green fur and stepped outside with a mouthpiece. He quickly accelerated towards the planet. The others stepped outside and secured their ship before following Broly. They quickly arrived and landed on an ice block. To be exact, the whole planet was frozen, and there was no place which wasn't covered in ice. But Broly didn't care about that. He used his life force vision and senses to see if there were any other creatures on it. He thought that if creatures lived here, they would know of the crystal or at least give him some clues. He quickly orbited the planet and skimmed over it with his senses until he found a faint signal. He almost missed it, since the life force was deep inside the planet. Without hesitation, he crashed through the millennia-old ice for kilometers in depth. After a minute of penetrating the planet, he arrived in a small cave. In the center of the cave, a purple crystal was embedded into the ground. The crystal was the thing that contained the life force. Chapter 82, Curse. He scanned the purpled crystal and could see something trapped inside. The crystal was rhythmically pulsating like a heart. Aaliyah, Kana, and Zangya landed beside him shortly after. They looked at each other and quietly asked if this was the Origin crystal. Broly furrowed his eyebrows. No, I don't think so. It is something else. He suddenly outstretched his arm and shining green key blade formed around his hand. He approached the crystal and chopped down on top of it. It went in for a few centimeters before stopping. It not only stopped but slowly pushed the key blade outside. Oh! Broly grinned. His muscles instantly expanded a bit, his hair rose, and his eye color changed into yellow. Without waiting for a second further, he applied more strength into his arm and cut right through the crystal. Crack! The crystal instantly broke into two, halves falling to one side respectively. A body dropped to the ground. It was slightly trembling, and its breath was shallow. The two Saiyans waited for Broly to help, attack, to just do something, but he only looked at it with interest in his eyes. The girls didn't know what race this creature was, only Zangya knew, since she had killed few of them in the past. It is a frost demon. Frost demon? Aaliyah and Kana were shocked, especially Kana, as she had already seen Frieza and Cold, but they didn't look like this. Yes, a frost demon in his final form. This one seems from another family than Frieza's, as he has bluish skin and these crystal-like things on his head, and in the middle of his chest are blue as well. He looks like Frost from Universe 6. Of course, Broly didn't say that out loud. He looked at Kana and was astonished that she didn't show any reaction to the revelation other than being surprised. Kana noticed Broly staring at her and smiled at him. He approached her and embraced her. Don't, it's embarrassing. Kana mumbled as she buried her head in Broly's chest. You? Embarrassed? That's new. You don't want to kill it? Broly asked her. I don't care about it. I may have been obsessed with revenge in the past, but now I have found someone to love. I don't need revenge to be happy. She looked up into Broly's eyes. His heart skipped a beat as he returned the gaze. He couldn't help but tighten his hug and lean in for a kiss. They made out for a few minutes, completely forgetting their surrounding until a cough pushed away the pink atmosphere in the air. Cough. He is waking up. Zangya's ears had a red hue as she pointed at the frost demon. Aaliyah only giggled from the side. Kana, unlike her usual boldness, became quiet and shy as she blushed and stole glances at Broly. Broly approached the frost demon and picked it up before leaning it against the wall. The frost demon had opened half his eyes and looked dozily on the ground. He suddenly widened his eyes in shock and tried to back away, but since he was leaning against the wall, he couldn't move further back. Broly distanced himself for a few meters. The frost demon looked at them in shock. How? How did you damn Saiyans find me? He shouted at them and wanted to point at them, but he lost strength and sunk to the ground. The others were of course confused and didn't know what to say until Broly spoke out. Humph, what a joke. You have nowhere to escape. Just tell us the location. Broly looked down on him with a fierce expression. The others looked at him with an expression that said, "What the fuck are you talking about?" "No, I will never tell you where we hid the curse breaker." The frost demon suddenly spotted Zangya and shouted at her, "What are you doing, Hera? How could you betray us? All of existence will be doomed if they can break it." "Curse? What curse is he talking about?" Broly picked up the frost demon. "Tell me everything you know about the curse and I will let you live." "Never." "Ah." The frost demon suddenly released a terrifying amount of ki as it swept outwards, destroying everything in its path. Broly jumped back and directly went legendary and created a barrier between the frost demon and his group. After a few seconds the light faded, and the dust slowly settled down. A huge crater was revealed at the spot where the frost demon exploded. A suicide technique that went beyond one's body's limit. He couldn't believe how strong this last attack was. It was even able to threaten him, if he didn't have paid attention. Maybe I should have used another approach. If I acted like a goody two-shoes, I could have gained more information. Sigh. Someone held his hand. He looked at Kana, who smiled faintly at him. He wouldn't have listened to us anyway. He only saw us as Saiyans, and that was reason enough for him. Yeah, if he knew that we were clueless about the curse, he wouldn't have told us anything anyway. Aaliyah said as she grasped his other hand, while shrugging her shoulders. Yeah, whatever. He was decisive enough to kill himself instead of spilling anything. He would have probably tried to kill you guys at any given chance. It is just a frost demon anyway. The universe wouldn't miss him. Zangya spoke out as well. Broly looked at her with a smile. He will just have to make a wish to Shenlong to get some information. He didn't think he would never find out about it anyway. The only thing that bothered him was that the frost demon seemed to be trapped inside the crystal for eons, which would mean that the curse goes way back. Broly unconsciously stared at Zangya as he pondered about it. What? Don't expect a hug from me. Zangya snorted before turning her head away, while a slight blush lingered on her face. And thanks for saving me. Us. Saving us. Aaliyah squinted her eyes at Zangya, who avoided her gaze. Broly petted Aaliyah and Kana's head for a bit before taking a few steps forward. He pushed the things what the frost demon said into the back of his mind. He wouldn't have known anything about it if he didn't come here. He had only gained from it, and now it was time to get what he was actually here for. He started circulating his energy, like it was depicted on the wall under the temple, and just looked down afterwards. He raised his hand and slashed downwards, creating a ki wave which tore through the ground. The ground split open for a few kilometers in length and a few meters in width. He headed straight downwards. It was only a guess, but it seems like he was right. The technique depicted on the wall was not only able to absorb the energy, but it created a feint connecting to the energy inside. Since it is a technique catered towards absorbing a specific energy, it was able to sense the energy the technique attracted. He flew deeper into the planet as he felt the connection grow stronger. Since he knew that the only living creature on this planet just died, he could only rely on the connection to make out the location. But it was only noticeable in close approximation to the said energy, which would take weeks to find the crystal. He just started to circulate his energy according to the technique and was surprised to find out that he could feel it below him. That was why he headed down now. They shouldn't be far away. Confirming his guess, he had found another cave with an 8x8x8 big blue crystal hovering in the middle of the room. Inside was energy rotating. That was easier than I thought, Zangya said as they landed behind Broly. He didn't bother with her and approached the crystal. He looked around with his vision and tried to sense for something or someone else in the room before he said, "Cover me while I am absorbing it." He cut his palm open, pressed it on the crystal, and started circulating the technique. He felt the energy inside it being attracted towards his hand and slowly entered his body. It headed towards his center where his ki and life force were being generated. But it didn't enter it but seemed to enforce and expand it with something for a while. Only after half an hour it started entering the empty place where his center was expanding and gathered there. It wasn't some kind of ki or life force, but it was still something he was familiar with. He endlessly gathered inside the center while a wisp of energy was used to change his center. He guessed that it needed place inside, and it had to change the center to accommodate this new energy. After hours he finally finished absorbing it, and he could feel that he gained the same ability, or rather affinity, to generate this new energy, and then he finally remembered where he had felt this energy before. Chapter 83. Origin's Energy Crystal. It felt like the energy from the fire breath of the Dracos on Perditus. I thought it was weird. I felt the ki they used in the breath, but I also sensed something else. I just thought it was because it is an innate ability which makes it different. Well, it is an innate ability, but they aren't only using ki, they are also using this kind of energy. Just what is it? Alright, I am done. You can have the rest. Broly stood up and looked at the amount he used from the crystal. The crystal was reduced to a size of 3 meters. This was normally more than enough for 12 people. So Aaliyah and Kana went ahead and started absorbing the energy. What are you waiting for? You too, he said to Zangya. You sure? I thought it was only for your girlfriends. No, it is for friends. Why else would I have taught you the technique to absorb it? Go absorb it, if you consider us as friends, that is. Zangya looked at him for a second before she quietly went to the crystal and absorbed the energy inside. While they were occupied with absorbing the energy inside, Broly focused on the energy inside his center. He guided it out to his hands and released it, but nothing happened. It just dispersed in the air. The only thing he could feel through it was the connection to the life force and the ki he naturally generated. They seemed to be interlinked with each other. The others were already done absorbing the energy. Wow, it increased my magic power. I can finally use it, Aaliyah said until her body suddenly changed into a blue dress. Mine as well, Zangya added. Magic power? You mean this is magic power? Broly was shocked. For some reason, he couldn't obtain a wisp of magic power, even after training with the techniques in the library for days. Aaliyah, Kana, and Zangya were able to grasp it after a day, but the energy they could gather were minuscule and weren't good for anything, so they didn't bother training it. Did you guys gain an ability? Broly inquired. I did. Kana shouted out happily and stretched out her hands. Out of her palms emerged aquamarine lightning that shot towards Broly. Broly just took it, and the lightning started wrapping itself around Broly. HM? This is. Broly tried to move, but realized that his control of his body was being restrained. It felt like his body was numbed and paralyzed. His muscles expanded, and his hair rose. His ki poured out until his eyes turned yellow. With a ki shockwave, the lightning was being dispersed. Impressive. You can even hold me down in my base. Kana looked rather smug after he complimented her. Broly, I did gain one as well, Aaliyah said and pointed at him with one finger. A red fire beam shot towards him. He felt his movements being influenced. He felt being physically drawn towards it, but he had no intention of dodging anyway. The beam finally hit him but couldn't push him backwards. It burned through his armor. It couldn't leave a mark on his skin, as he was still in his Ikari form. What about you? Broly turned towards Zangya, who just shook her head. So, Broly, what ability did you learn? Can you automatically generate magic power? Aaliyah asked him. Yes, I did, Broly admitted. Can we go back? Or do you want to have this conversation on this ice block floating in space? Zangya rushed them to go back. On board, Broly went through all techniques that used magic power at its basis. He also found a general introduction to magic power. It said that magic power is a mysterious energy that had almost no limitations, but it was only reasonable to focus mainly on magic if one is born with great talent or an unusual high amount of magic in one's body. Some races are more adept in using it than others, but generally every deity have magic abilities or can use magic. It is said to be able to become anything you want, creating elements, minerals, or other more complex things consisting out of multiple elements is entirely possible. One can also use the elements to attack, but ki would be the better option as it is more destructive. Another method to attack with magic power would be mental attacks. It can even go so far that one can control someone who is normally far stronger than oneself. Broly thought of the instances of magic uses in the series. It was usually only used to create something like clothes or Kachin, which was one of the strongest metals in the universe. But Babidi, for example, could control Dabura, the king of the demon realm, a being who was supposedly stronger than Cell. The teleportation of the Kais should be included as well. Broly faintly remembered reading about it in his past life. It would make sense why the instant transmission is only possible through ki senses, and Kibito was able to teleport himself wherever he wanted. But now that he thought about it, in the series were also instances of elemental attacks like the fire breath of Hirudegarn, which was a being brought to life by sorcerers. It wasn't detailed in the series, but Broly figured that those elemental attacks had to be a product of magic. He knew that ki in high concentration could produce lightning, but fire or water. He hadn't heard about that. Fortunately for him, there were some techniques in the library that explained how to create elemental attacks, and the most common technique among magic users was there as well, magic materialization. Before he started to immerse himself into the utilization of magic, he set course on the last destination on his list for now, planet Earth. He typed in the coordinates of the planet and started the autopilot. It would take them 1 month to cross almost the whole Milky Way to get there. So, we are visiting Giant's son? Kana's voice suddenly sounded out behind him. Yeah. Kana squinted her eyes before continuing. You won't bully him, right? Of course not. Hoo, Broly faked a laugh. Sigh, could you finally turn around? Broly turned his head and saw her standing in lingerie. He quickly scanned the spaceship with his life force vision and saw Aaliyah and Zangya eating, but what he did saw was a change to his vision. If he concentrated on it, he was faintly able to see energy particles that didn't belong to life force, but to ki and magic as well. It seemed to fill the surroundings. It was weird, but he was able to see how some particles combined with each other and got some ideas on how to combine his magic with his ki attacks, especially his Thunder Spear. If he combined it with magic lightning, the strength would rise exponentially, which was confirmed by the general introduction about magic. It said that some ki attack compatible with magic would result in a rise of strength. Usually one would need to use magic as the foundation and use ki as a support, since ki was mostly a destructive energy and magic would be able to adapt to it to some degree. But it was not impossible to use ki as the foundation, if one had enough skill, that is. As he went through on how to combine his attacks with magic, Kana was being hugged from behind by Aaliyah. Is he coming up with new techniques? Yeah, he just started. So he probably comes out of his thinking modus after an hour. Nice underwear, by the way. Where did you get that? You know, the last planet we visited? Kana was surprised that Broly suddenly stood up, as she didn't expect him to be finished so soon. I thought you were coming up with techniques. Well, I don't know much about magic yet, so I have to make some research, but first I will devour you. You were just too cute when you said that in the cave. Kana blushed at the thought about it. Although she was a dirty talker, she rarely said anything romantically. Broly picked them up and headed towards their bedroom. He let them both down and they turned towards him, before Aaliyah jumped at him and dangled from his neck and spoke out. I love you, Broly. She gave him a passionate kiss afterwards. Broly suddenly felt Kana holding his hand and shyly said, I love you, dash. Her head was already red as a tomato at this point. Broly took her in his arms, hugged her tightly before giving Kana a deep kiss. He took them both in his arms and just looked at the two for a moment. I love you, Kana. Aaliyah. The girl's eyes widened. This is the first time you said it. They both said in unison. It was about time, wasn't it? Broly looked at them affectionately, which caused the girls to tear up before burying their heads in his chest. Zhangya saw the three ran into their bedroom and frustratedly bit her lip. I guess I am going to train all night. It is not like I could sleep anyway, right? Indeed, it became a long night for the love trio, as they went on without stopping and no consideration of any other person on this ship. Chapter 84, Robbery. Halfway across the Milky Way, their journey was undisturbed until one day they were tailed by another spaceship. Broly immediately told them to slow down the ship and greet them in person. He didn't want them to shoot at their ship. Although his ship wasn't defenseless, on the contrary, it was a tough nut to crack and the retaliation would be fierce as well. He just trusted his body more than the ship. Besides, if something was destroyed, it would only delay their journey. Broly stepped out of his ship with his battle armor and waited for them, floating in space. Shortly after, a variety of aliens flew outside with cannons attached to their arm. They wore the standard armor of the Frieza army. Finally, some pray. It is just too hard to survive after Lord Frieza's injury. True, these people form the Galactic Patrol are becoming more and more aggressive. Come on, let's ravage this ship and get on with it. I don't want the patrol to be on our asses again. Are you done? Broly spoke out. Aye, shut the fuck up. Who said you can talk? You mother dash. Broly appeared right in front of him, shocking the living shit out of the alien. Fucker. The alien shouted as he tried to raise his arm and shoot Broly, but he couldn't move it, no matter how hard he tried. Pfft, that does look funny. Broly pointed at his arm. The other aliens grasped as they looked at their comrade. Your arm. Someone shouted. The alien looked down and saw nothing. His arm was nowhere to be seen. There was only blood floating around in zero gravity. He wanted to scream, but a hand clutched his neck. Not a single word was able to escape his lips. He was flailing around, but to no avail until his neck snapped. All right, I don't have the nerve to play with every single one of you. Broly waved his arm and dozens of ki blasts flew out of his palm and homing on a different alien each. No. Retreat. Aw fuck. Who is that monster? Wah, he help? The group was instantly decimated and pulverized into space dust with no survivors. Broly headed to the enemy's ship, which already started its engine, ready to take off, but would Broly let them? Broly, as if teleporting, appeared in front of the ship and pressed his hand against it, stopping it from moving. He raised his other hand and shot a few ki beams through the ship's window. Without able to resist, the pilots were easily pierced by the attack. Broly ripped open hole into the ship with his hands and entered it without concern. Everything inside was being sucked out by the empty space, but Broly quickly closed it with a ki barrier. He picked up a thin, orange alien, who only lost a lower leg and was nowhere near to dying. Hello, my friend. I just wanted to ask if there was something of value on this ship. The alien just looked horrified at him. He was panting and sweating heavily from the pain, but Broly showed no compassion for him. Broly furrowed his eyebrows, seeing the alien nor respond. Let me rephrase that. Tell me about something that is of value and hopefully for you. It should be enough to save your life. There is nothing on board. We are in a tight spot, since Lord Frieza was injured by a Super Saiyan. We are on low budget, since King Cold took Frieza's army. I swear there is nothing on here. Please have mercy. Broly only rolled his eyes at the mention of mercy, as if anyone in Cold's or Frieza's army ever showed mercy. I didn't say I would let you off for free, Sue. He just flew up, through the roof into space. He turned around and waved his hand, sending out a ki wave instantly pulverizing the ship, before he headed towards his own ship. He entered and was greeted with 3 females happily chatting with each other while eating. Unbelievable. What if I was dying outside? Well, then we all would be fucked, Zangya said as she cut her meat into a smaller piece and ate it, which was quite the contrast to the devouring female Saiyans on the side. I thought you would at least give me verbal support. I am not the legendary Super Saiyan, but we all are. Kana raised an eyebrow and responded with a full mouth. Swallow before you speak. Gulp. For you I always swallow. Kana gave him wink before continuing. But, we are the legendary Super Saiyan. What kind of dumb saying is that? Ahem. Don't worry about it. How long till we reach Earth? Another 2 weeks. I already turned the autopilot on. Sit down and eat, Aaliyah said as she put some plates on the table and pulled the empty chair out. Broly gave her a kiss. Thank you. Aaliyah smiled happily. Broly couldn't help but squish her cheek. Man, you are adorable. Aaliyah was blushing slightly and sat down next to Kana. Broly couldn't help but smile contently as he sat down and looked at the two. I really can't get enough of you two. He started eating and was quickly devouring the food. The 2 girls stopped moving as their face changed crimson red. Broly loved how easily they were flustered when there was company around, even after 5 years of intimacy and affection. In the last 2 weeks of training, he memorized every magic technique, everything about magic utilization. He became more efficient in using magic. He was able to convert it into elemental attacks. Kana and Aaliyah also taught him how they felt when they used their abilities. It made him understand how to convert the magic into other materials, seemingly out of thin air. He also mastered how to create clothes, but he failed to increase the weight for the clothes to a satisfying degree in which didn't obstruct his movements. He had to use more energy for stronger materials or for a higher amount of something. So, to create Kachin, he would need to spend much more time training to be more proficient in magic usage before he could succeed. As for now, he was only able to increase the weights of his clothes to a few tens of kilograms. In the future, when his magic reached a higher level, it would be tremendously helpful to train with them on. For the next 2 weeks, he concentrated on his magic use as they shot through space towards Earth. On occasion, there would be people who would try to rob them. In the beginning, they used it as a way to kill some time, but it became so frequent that they didn't bother and started to escape or attack with their ship. Broly found it really satisfying to fly a spaceship and have a space battle. With his superior reflexes, he was able to close and surpass the gap of skill between him and the other pilots. It delayed their journey for another week, but finally as Broly gazed out of the window, he saw the familiar blue planet. Remember what I said. Hide your aura. Yeah, and if we see Earthlings wanting to fight us, don't kill them, Zangya added. The ship started to become more and more transparent until it vanished from sight. It quickly entered the atmosphere of Earth and headed straight for land. It directly landed on an island deep out in the ocean, far away from the public eye. There was a large forest on the island with plenty of wildlife. A door of the ship seemingly opened out of nowhere, since they were still cloaked. A tall figure stepped out. Of course, this was Broly. He took a deep breath and inhaled the fresh air. The girls followed him outside and took a breath as well. It seemed they enjoyed the air as well. It has been a while, since they spent most of their time training inside the spaceship for years and only stepped out to get some supplies. It was always refreshing for them to move around for a while. This was especially true for a beautiful planet like this. Broly enjoyed being in the nature since his past life. That was also one of the reasons why he took such a long time to travel around on Perditus. So, are we going to visit Jine's son? Aaliyah asked. Considering what the alien said about Frisia, he will only arrive in a year. While we are waiting, we are having a small vacation and enjoy the food here, but our main objective is the Dragon Balls. Dragon Balls? Yes, they are crystal orbs that can fulfill any wish. Well, not any, but a large range of wishes. Chapter 85, Radar. Fulfill wishes? Yes, it is even possible to revive people with them. After Broly said that, he looked at Kana, who was visible shaken, but she didn't say anything, as the two have already talked about it. She didn't need to take revenge anymore, but to revive her family is something she couldn't resist. Broly told her that since it has been a long time, there could be problems with this wish, and if these Dragon Balls couldn't get the job done, then they had to find more powerful Dragon Balls. Broly also told her that they won't use the ones from Earth, but the ones from the Namekians, since they could fulfill more wishes. He also had other uses, so she needed to wait a bit longer. She said that she could wait years for it, and that Broly should focus first on his wishes. Alright, first stop will be the Capsule Corporation headquarters. To make it easier to find the Dragon Balls, we need a radar. It will also be helpful on New Namek. Cool, and where is it? Zangya asked. Right, let's ask an Earthling. Oh, you don't know. I already thought you knew everything about this planet. Zangya shaded her eyes with her hand as she gazed at the glaring sun. Hee. Of course not. Alright, let's get moving. They started flying slowly. Since Broly asked them to stay low-key for now, they only had low amount of ki at disposal. After a while, they reached what seemed like the mainland. Broly used his life force vision to find the nearest city and they all headed towards it. They landed at the suburbs and some guy's eyes almost popped out. He shook his head heavily, seemingly denying what he just saw. Broly approached him. The guy was terrified. Because of the stature of Broly, he took a few steps backwards. Hey, I have dash. Broly couldn't finish his sentence before the guy started a full sprint away, almost tripping on the way. Ahem, okay. Let me try, Aaliyah said as she put her hand over her chest. She went up to a young woman. Hello, miss. Can I ask you a question? The young woman didn't seem to respond as she stared dazed at Aaliyah. Her cheeks became crimson red. Yes please, ask away. For some reason she was stuttering. Aaliyah tilted her head in confusion. This act seemed to have short-circuited the young woman, as smoke seemed to come out of her head. Aaliyah grasped her hand. Are you okay? Yes my queen. What do you want to know? Ahem, okay. I want to know where exactly the West City is. Yes, of course, the West City. You only have to head this way, and the third city you come across is the West City. Oh, thank you very much. Hope you have a nice day. Aaliyah turned around and walked towards her group. Do you want to go on a date with me? The woman suddenly shouted out. Sorry, I already have a boyfriend. Aaliyah turned her head to answer and pointed at Broly, who was grinning the whole time. The woman's head was red as a tomato and suddenly ran away in embarrassment. Oh, Aaliyah, you are even attracting the women. I wouldn't have expected anything less from my girl. Broly said happily. I didn't do anything. Aaliyah shyly responded. The people here are weird. Zangya commented. Well, it is probably because you guys are so beautiful, Broly said as he looked at the people around them, staring at him and the girls. Some even took out their phones and took pictures. All right, let's go to West City. Why didn't we just orbit it around the planet and quickly search the city you want to go to? Because it is fun. We were training for years inside that ship. Now we can have some fun. Asking for the way is fun for you? Zangya rebuked. Well, talking with other people, see new things. Or are you just satisfied with seeing and talking to me? Broly teased her. Her ears slightly became red.
HHMPH.
Broly started flying upwards towards West City. The girls followed behind him. This started a commotion among the people that had gathered around them. They were flashing with their phones after them. They were sharing those pictures with their friends and on social media with titles like, Gods are among us, Superheroes visit XXX City, and so on. They quickly arrived in the next city and Broly again landed in the middle of the street. He ignored the tumult he caused and headed straight into a restaurant and ordered the whole menu. Of course, now the group didn't complain as they waited for the food to come. After a short while the food was delivered to their table, completely taking up all the space. Like Saiyans do, they quickly devoured their food like there was no tomorrow. This is so good, Kana exclaimed, and even Zangya was hasting to eat, as she feared that there would be nothing left with these Saiyans around. In the ship, they usually had simple food, only with Broly came some variation into their meals. Now they had dozens of different variations of delicious food. They even ordered seconds and thirds. Only after an hour were their stomach filled to the brim. Afterwards they just left. The waiter wanted to stop them but was afraid of Broly. Broly just gave him a small block of gold. He just materialized and went out. He flew and speeded up to West City. This time without any distraction, they arrived at the city in a short moment. They hovered over the city, while Broly scanned the city. Soon he found the famous building with Capsule Corp written on the outside wall. You wait here, I do this alone. Broly quickly approached the building and lowered his aura to the minimum. He used his life force vision to see if there was anyone near. Making sure no one could see him, he quickly made his way inside. Of course, already with a hoodie, he materialized over his head. He quickly ran through the huge building to find their laboratory. After searching for a while, he found the entrance and saw Dr. Brief work on something. He looked through the things on the table and quickly found what he was looking for, a small round radar with a button on the top. Suddenly the air seemed to stagnate, and the ground and wall started cracking. The next thing his figure and the radar blinked away without notice. If one doesn't count the shocked expression from Krillin and Yamcha. What was that? Yamcha shouted out in shock. Yo, you felt that too? Krillin looked terrified around him, searching for anyone who could have leaked that immense key. Yeah, I almost thought someone fired an attack at us. Even after a while, they found nothing, and nothing seemed to happen. Broly quickly arrived back to his group and waved the radar in his hand. Got it. So that is the radar. It is smaller than I thought, Zangya said as she saw the radar. Ouch, Zangya. Not nice. HM? Anyway, why do we even need to hide? Can't we just take it? Why? Because if we make an entrance, it has to be epic. We can't just approach them and ask for the radar and leave afterwards. Zangya rolled her eyes, while Aaliyah just giggled. All right, let's see where they are. Shouldn't take too long to gather all of them. He pressed on the button, and instantly a few arrows appeared on the screen. He double-pressed the button, and it zoomed out showing the locations. All right, follow me. Broly started to fly towards the nearest one. All right, it should be around here. They hovered over a small lake a waterfall ended in. They were rather deep in the wilderness, but Broly let out his aura, which scared all the animals away. All right, let's search. It will be better if we spread out. Remember, it is a small crystal-like orange ball with stars inside it, which looks the same no matter from which side you look at it. All right, whoever finds it first gets a night alone with Dash. Kana wanted to bet on something but was quickly interrupted. Found it. Zangya suddenly spoke out before diving into the lake. After a few seconds, she came back out and held the ball in hand. It reflected the sunshine. So, what did I win? Zangya said with a smug face. You won a whole night alone in the storage room. Yes, for a whole night you can choose whichever meal you want. Kana panicked and said some bullshit. Obviously, she did not think about the fact that Zangya could also win. She only rolled her eyes as a response and threw the Dragon Ball towards Broly, who caught it and put it into a small brown bag he had just materialized. Man, this ability is really useful. Chapter 86, Dragon Balls. With their strength, it wouldn't have taken long to gather them all, but Broly always messed around and went to different cities to look around. The others were happy to comply, as they would always discover new delicious food to eat. Zangya also took great interest in the culinary world on this planet. After a few days, they had gathered 6 Dragon Balls and were on their way to the last one. They were flying through rock formations. The surroundings looked like the one Vegeta and Kakarot first fought. The others didn't know why, but Broly was happy to see the environment. For them it looked like wasteland with a bunch of rocks, but for Broly, it was a historical site of great emotional value. Although he never was here, it didn't hold his joy back. After a while, they closed in on the location until they saw a figure sitting cross-legged on top of a pillar-like boulder. In front of her on the ground was the 3-star Dragon Ball, the last they needed to gather to fulfill their wish. It was a young, beautiful woman with bluish skin and a tail. Her orange hair was tied to a ponytail and her blue eyes conveyed an unwavering determination. She was well-toned with no unnecessary bulking muscles, obviously a body trained with martial arts. She looked at them with no surprise in her eyes. Broly and the other girls land on a rock formation each not far from each other. He scanned her and thought she was familiar but couldn't just put his finger on it. Hello, dear. Is it possible that you can give us the ball in front of you? I wondered when you would finally come. She picked up the Dragon Ball and stood up. She only looked at Broly and shortly glanced at Zangya. She raised the Dragon Ball behind her head and threw it hard at Broly. It wasn't hard in terms of human strength but hard in terms of Broly's. Even Broly wouldn't be able to throw it as strong in his base form. In an instant, Broly buffed up, his hair rose like that of a Super Saiyan and began to shine golden and his eyes turned yellow. He had turned directly into his Super Saiyan Akari as he caught the Dragon Ball with one arm and jumped over a sweeping leg. Broly instantly kicked out with all his might. His leg tore through the air straight at the woman, but she just crossed her arms, blocking the attack while being thrown into the air. Each others were already in their battle stances and transformed into their most powerful form. The woman dropped her guard and revealed shining yellow eyes. The group was shocked. This looked and felt like the Akari form from Broly. You. Who are you? Broly growled at the woman. Humph. I never thought you were this weak, father. With a sneer, she looked at him. With the same expression, she looked at the girls with a cursory glance. Broly narrowed his eyes as he saw that woman look at his girls in disgust. So, you are from the future. Think you can just disrespect me? Broly's body instantly increased in size, adapting a 3-meter-tall physique. His eyes were still yellow. Evidently, he was still in his Akari form. He shot through the air and instantly appeared in front of the woman. He threw a punch with an accompanying thunderous boom as it headed straight at the woman's head. It instantly pierced through the head, but there was no blood. The figure of the woman slowly faded away. An afterimage? He felt someone behind him and without further thought just rotated his body while kicking out. The woman just raised her left arm and easily blocked the kick. Broly was shocked as he saw that and quickly distanced himself. The woman had transformed. Her hair pointed into the sky with a shining green hue. Her eyes turned yellow as well, but instead of a bulky transformation, she was as lean as before. The air around her was electrified as lightning circulated around her. Broly instantly knew that this was the legendary Super Saiyan 2. What do you want? Broly's serious voice was booming more than usual. What I want? Your head. She disappeared from his sight, only to re-emerge on his side, stabbing into his side with her arm. It took his breath as he shot through the air into the rock formation, pulverizing everything in his path. Only after a few hundred meters he regained balance midair and quickly stopped his momentum. He flew into the air and saw how Aaliyah, Kana, and Zangya headed straight at the woman from the future. You bitch! Kana screamed out as she released hundreds of punches and kicks in seconds, but no matter how hard she tried, the opponent used little movements to evade her attacks. Zangya and Aaliyah quickly joined in and attacked her from all sides, but the difference was too obvious. The woman causally waved her arm, and a shockwave in all directions shot the girls away like cannonballs. The woman turned her head and saw a green light sizzling through the air towards her. Her arrogant expression changed for the first time. Her hair suddenly changed from the green into a blue, as she seemed to grab something in the air. She released a divine pressure on the surrounding people as she held a green shining spear only a few centimeters away from her face. I have never seen you use this technique before, Father. With a squeeze, the spear shattered into pieces. How is this possible? Super Saiyan Blue? Oh, as informed as ever. Why don't you tell me why you want me dead? I believe this is just a big misunderstanding. After seeing his mightiest attack being blocked easily, he knew that he wouldn't stand a chance against her. Maybe he could beat her if they were around the same strength, but Super Saiyan Blue was too far away for him. Strangely, though, he became calmer, understanding his dire situation. Misunderstanding? Don't think you can sway me with your words. You are just scum, who needs to be eradicated. She shouted at him. Even this put pressure on him. He hadn't thought that the distance to a god would be so far. I think you have a wrong view of me. I am actually a nice guy. Nice guy, you? She suddenly disappeared and reappeared in front of Broly. She slammed her fist into his stomach, making Broly spit out. She knocked him into the ground and released a flurry of attacks on him. He crossed his arms in front of his arms, but the defense was easily destroyed as the attacks seemingly came with no end. She pummeled him into the ground without stopping, like she needed to vent something. It was a strange sight to see a young woman thrash a 3-meter-tall monster-like man. The universe is better without you. A punch directly hit his throat, making him gasp. Cough, cough. Since I am your father, cough. How about you talk to me? We can resolve this peacefully. Broly held his throat as blood leaked out of his mouth. The woman slowly hovered above him. Humph. Accept your death, Broly. A key blade formed in her hand as she raised her arm and pointed it at Broly's head. Suddenly vigor appeared in Broly's eyes again. Hiya! Broly's energy instantly erupted like a violent volcano. A key blade with another energy formed over his hand as he stabbed towards her. He used everything he had. He was burning life force as fast as he could. He poured all his ki and magic power he had stored in his body and put it in this final attack. Like deadly laser beam, the blade extended towards the woman as he thrusted his arm towards the woman. Like an unstoppable force, it instantly reached the woman and pierced her body. The blade extended seemingly endlessly into the sky. Broly was shocked, not because of the strength of his attack, but what the woman did. Her body created multiple afterimages as she moved out of the blade's way by turning her body slightly. He didn't pierce her, but her movement just created another afterimage. She was too fast for him to grasp. He looked at her in shock. Nice try, but your death is needed. It has to be done. She stretched out her hand towards him, and in an instant a blade appeared. Broly looked down and saw the key blade piercing right through his chest. He had already transformed back to his base as he had no energy to support his legendary state anymore. But even if he had, there was no way to beat this opponent. He could faintly hear the screams of Aaliyah, Kana, and Zangya. The woman from the future pulled out the blade and dispersed it. Without strength, his arm fell to the ground as he coughed out blood. He looked into the sky and saw the others attack her, but the woman just chopped at their necks, making them instantly faint. The woman slowly landed beside him again, and the arrogance and disgust which was ever present in her eyes disappeared as tears appeared in her eyes, falling on top of Broly. She kneeled down next to him and supported his head. I thought I could hate you, after all you did, but I just can't. I am sorry, Dad. I had to. I was the only one left. I am so sorry. Her sobbing resounded in the surroundings, but Broly wasn't able to hear anything anymore as his conscience was plunged into darkness. Chapter 87. Take over. As soon as Broly's conscience faded, the black pearl span faster until black threads shot out and spread all over his ki center. It leached onto Broly's life force pearl, ki, and magic power. The energy flowed through those threads towards him, making the pearl seem like a black hole as it devoured everything. This process didn't stop here. The threads started spreading through his ki and headed towards Broly's spine and head. It attached itself onto his brain and nervous system. The woman didn't notice this as she was crying, and the process only took a few seconds. Only after seeing the black lines over Broly's skin she noticed that something was wrong. But this was enough time for the threads to spread through the whole body. Broly's eyes shot open. He instantly grabbed towards the woman, but she was barely able to evade it. She quickly distanced herself and turned Super Saiyan Blue. The wound she inflicted on Broly was quickly being melded with black threads. He slowly stood up and started cracking his neck with his hands. Ah, ka 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 ka. This body is phenomenal. Although it is very weak, its potential is almost endless. Generating life force, ki, and magic power? This is a treasure trove. What do you mean, this body? Who are you? He squinted his eyes as he looked back at the woman. Me? I am Cacus, and you? It seems like you are a close relative to this body. Probably his daughter. Hee hee hee. He suddenly buffed up, becoming a 3-meter giant, and his eyes turned yellow. What did you do to him? She suddenly disappeared and emerged on one side of Cacus. Her leg tore through the air, instantly appearing in front of Cacus. Cacus evaded the hit by bending backwards and retaliated with a kick of his own. She blocked it with her hands and quickly followed with a kick against his side. Cacus shot through the air, but not even 10 meters away, he had regained his balance. She squinted her eyes as she saw this. Have you always been in my dad's body? Him? Ha ha ha. Yes, I have been reborn with him. His soul guided mine from a prison far away to this universe, to this body. I was lucky that I was the first to notice something strange. As soon as I saw his soul, I immediately latched onto him and we were directly sucked into a rift. Her eyes seemed to flicker with uncertainty. Oh, don't cry, sweetie. I would have taken over this body even without you. You just shortened the time by a few decades. To be honest, I was prepared to sleep for eons as I didn't think that the bloodline I enslaved still existed. Noticed my return and actually supplied me with life force. Ha ha ha. Once slaves, now worshippers. It is too funny. Ha 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 ha. You, give my dad his body back or dash. Or else what? You have so much power, but have no idea how to use it. There is no way in darkness that you can beat me. As soon as he finished, Cacus seemed to teleport in front of the woman and slammed his fist inside her stomach. She shot through a mountain and bounced over the ground several times. She quickly used her legs on the ground to stop her speed as she created 100-meter-long trenches. She calmly looked at Cacus, who possessed her father's body, walk towards her. We killed him, Cacus once. Although I am alone, he is much weaker this time. She grabbed into her left pocket inside her pants before she straightened her back and steadied her breath as she slowly got into her battle stance, which resembled Broly's. Left foot in front of her right, and her arms slightly outstretched to the side. As his response, his eyes started shining brighter with every step. They both instantly vanished. A thunderous boom sounded out as they collided with each other, and Cacus was sent flying. The shockwave directly pulverized the rock formations as it swept through the surroundings. The two started exchanging attacks as they rose into the air. Every collision shook the earth, and the space trembled. The only reason why the whole planet didn't crumble apart was of their precise control. The earthquake-like tremble woke up the three girls. They slowly opened their eyes as they only heard cataclysm explosions thundering in the background. They looked into the sky and only saw how space distorted in several places. This fight wasn't just leagues above them. It was a whole different dimension of power they couldn't even imagine reaching. They didn't dare approach the heavenly figures in the sky, as they were afraid even stray energy would instantly pulverize them. Is that Broly? Zangya asked as she tried to catch a glimpse at the figures in the sky. Maybe, it feels like similar to his ki. I also can't sense anything from the other person except pressure. What is going on? Suddenly a figure appeared behind the girls. It grabbed them, and they all vanished from sight. The fight went on for a minute with her easily dominating Cacus. She could end this fight in an instant, but she couldn't kill him without killing her father. While she tried to find another way, Cacus' strength increased as they fought. It wouldn't take long before he becomes a threat. Suddenly a punch headed straight at her face. She evaded it and rotated her body. She used the momentum of the punch to do a shoulder throw. Cacus crashed heavily onto the ground, instantly creating a massive crater. The woman was breathing calmly. She let her gaze wander through the surroundings before she saw Cacus hovering in the air not far away. His mouth leaked a bit of blood. He wiped it away and looked at the blood on his backhand. He showed no fear despite the numerous cuts on his body. He seemed to be not bothered by the fact that he was being overpowered as he melded his wounds with black threads. You seem to be rather calm, not worried that you were about to die? The woman raised an eyebrow as her gaze stopped at his chest for a second. His ki feels similar to previously again, and the lines are slowly disappearing. Is he fusing with Dad's body? He only grinned as a response as he looked down on the planet. He suddenly rose his arm and swung it down. A wave of ki blast directly headed towards Earth while he turned around and outstretched his arms forward. It looked like he was ripping apart space as it created a white tear at his fingertips. The woman had already deflected the attack and shot towards Cacus, who had almost escaped. He already put a foot inside until two figures appeared on his sides and grabbed an arm on each side. What? Surprised by the unexpected people, he immediately tried to flee, but they immediately flung him away. He quickly regained his balance and looked at the newcomers. He squinted his eyes. Gods of destruction? A slim purple and hairless humanoid SBHYNX cat with wide long ears and a shining blue jelly-like humanoid with purple eyes. His hair joined together to form a pointy tip on his head. Dispo Majikeo. Took you long enough. At least we didn't arrive too late. I had to get some people out of harm's way. It is my duty to help them. Dispo patted his own chest as he said that. Anyway, let's get this done with. Since you weren't able to take Broly out on your own, we will do it for you. TCH, don't become cocky. I may have become rusty, but mere gods won't be able to get rid of me, especially not weak gods like you. Cacus erupted with a huge amount of ki, and 2 green ki blade formed inside his palms. Before Cacus was able to move, Dispo emerged right in front of him and closed in with a hand that shone in a purple color. What? Hakai. Wait, don't kill him. The woman shouted out. Cacus panicked seeing the purple destruction energy approach him. Without further thought, his ki blades exploded inside his hands, throwing him barely out of harm's way. His arms were bloody, but he was still alive as he shot through the air. Suddenly, several blue jelly spikes followed him. At the end of each spike shone with purple color. They were evidently powered with Hakai energy as they pursued Cacus. Cacus immediately chose to flee, but the spikes didn't give up on the chase. He could only flee in haste. He heard how the spikes penetrated the ground behind him and its crumbling apart afterwards. He gritted his teeth and flew into the air, turned around and shot a ki blast at Majikeo, hoping to distract him. All of a sudden, the woman appeared right in front of his face and pressed her hand on his chest. Hakai. Cacus widened his eyes as he looked at his chest. The Hakai energy was slowly erasing the black threads that melded his wound. Without giving him any opportunities, the blue jelly-like spikes from Majikeo accurately hit the wounds melded with black threads, erasing the threads from existence. Dispo appeared behind him and did the same while driving 2 fingers inside a wound. Cacus immediately knew what they were trying to do and quickly tried to cut the threads off the pearl, but his pearl seemed to freeze. It was directly attacked by the very life force, ki, and magic power he had absorbed. It was under the influence of someone else. Broly had regained his conscious. Chapter 88. Healed Up. Broly had regained his conscious as soon as Cacus was first hit by Hakai. In that moment, Cacus' system, that spread through Broly's body, went into shock, allowing Broly to attain control over his energy again. Broly instantly knew what was going on in his body as he could see the Hakai energy destroying the black threads. Without hesitation, he pumped as much energy into the threads as he could possibly do. He knew that he couldn't destroy the pearl with normal attacks as he had tried it numerous times in the past, so instead, he guided his energy into the black pearl and started rampaging inside, while forcing every bit of life force inside it out. He started destroying the pearl from the inside with everything he got. He even went as far as to let his ki and magic power create mini explosions inside. If something went wrong, he could potentially cripple himself, but he couldn't hesitate. If he held back, it would be the end for him. However, this enabled him to stun Cacus for a brief moment. Numerous explosions sounded out inside his body as he destroyed the pearl. The Hakais were erasing the black threads inside his body, but Cacus had cut the connection after the initial delay, but it was already too late for him. Holes had already appeared on his pearl. Since he was located inside Broly's center where he generated ki, life force, and magic power, he had no way to escape. He was sitting trapped inside the lion's den, waiting to be devoured. Cacus was trying to meld the pearl to close of the holes, but Broly made sure to force life force inside, so he could attack him from both sides. It took time. Slowly but surely, Broly was able to tear apart the pearl's shell bit by bit. Inside the pearl was a black hair-like wisp of energy, which was evidently Cacus' soul. It started shining as Cacus tried to communicate with Broly. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I was only trying to save us both. I can give you unbelievable knowledge about, wait, no. I can break the curse that resides in Nu. Don't. You can't kill me, the universe's nay dash. Without a moment of hesitation, Broly flooded the soul with every bit of energy he got and grinded it to particles. This all happened in only an instant, but it had decided Broly's fate. The pearl inside him had now completely vanished from his center, as well as the threads through his body. Finished, he was trying to open his eyes, but exhaustion overwhelmed him, and he fell into a deep sleep. After an unknown amount of time, Broly slowly opened his eyes. He looked at a familiar desk through a window. He looked around and saw himself inside a healing pod on his personal spaceship. He pressed the button next to the window, and the water was slowly being drained. The window door opened. He stepped outside and stared in the mirror on the wall. He was confused for a second before remembering what had happened. He stroked the 10-centimeter-long scar on his chest. He frowned for a second before closing his eyes as he sensed the life force in the surroundings. He walked out of the room and headed towards the exit. He opened the hatch and directly jumped out. He walked straight at a person who was roasting a big piece of meat. His body expanded in size until it reached his maximum size of 3 meters. His eyes were shining yellow as he raised his arm. Without saying anything, he consecutively fired off countless ki blasts at the person. The figure was surprised at the sudden attack and had no time to evade the blasts. Broly started accelerating as he still fired his ki attacks. He broke out in a full-force sprint as he directly plunged into the swirled smokescreen. He punched out towards the life force he was sensing. He felt the direct hit. The collision created a shockwave that dispersed the smoke and revealed a blue, shining figure blocking Broly's attack with one hand. Dad, you should take it slow, I dash. Don't fucking dad me. The idea of listening to her bullshit didn't come to Broly's mind as he unleashed a wrathful rain of punches, but no matter how he attacked, it was all easily blocked. Seeing her not retaliate only pissed Broly more off. This supposedly future daughter of his not only almost killed him, but even disrespected him now by looking at him with these eyes filled with concern. He couldn't stand it. Uraf. His ki suddenly rose in strength as lightning appeared around his body and his hair seemed even more electrified as usual. He was gaining momentum as he attacked her, but was still unable to push her back in the slightest. He was in a frenzy as he only thought about beating her up. For minutes this went on. A giant crater already formed underneath them. Trees were uprooted, and boulders pulverized. Suddenly the woman flicked her arm. He wasn't able to clearly see the movements or react to it, but was able to feel the impact on his neck as he fainted. He woke up in a bed on the infirmary of his ship. He became irritated as he thought about how he lost again to the same woman. He turned his head and saw Aaliyah holding his hand against her lips with Kana sitting next to her, while Zangya stood off to the side watching them. Seeing them instantly calmed him. You were finally back. I thought you would die dash. Aaliyah's tears fell onto his hand as she gave him a smile. She went through his hair and leaned in for a kiss. Her tears were wetting his face, but he didn't mind as he returned the kiss. Kana already climbed inside the bed and lay down beside him. You really made us worry about you. Her voice was faltering as she tried to suppress herself from sobbing. Although she had turned her head, he knew that Zangya wiped away her tears quietly. This went on for some time until Broly decided to break the silence. What does she want? Their sobbing stopped and Aaliyah looked at him with a bitter and saddened smile. Promise you won't interrupt me when I tell her story. He looked at her for a second, but he saw that she already took a firm standpoint on it. All right, I promise. Sai, you already know that she is from the future. She is your and Zangya's daughter. Aaliyah looked at the back of the silent Zangya before continuing. In a few years you would have given birth to her, Helen. It all went well for you, until you changed. She only realized it now, but you were possessed by the soul inside your body after you went out alone in the search of the Super Dragon Balls. Cacus, after taking control of your body, rampaged across the universes and erased most of them. Only in a last standoff with the gods, angels, and every other powerful warrior in existence, they were able to defeat Cacus and kill him. The universes in her timeline are in shambles, and they decided to send her and two new appointed gods of destructions into the past and use the Dragon Balls there to revive theirs. Since they already created another timeline, she wanted it to be better than hers and kill you before something like her future could happen again. Because you are her father, she wanted to do it herself, but after Cacus took over your body, she realized that you were just another victim of his and saved you. Broly didn't say anything even after she finished. Obviously, he could understand Helen's motivation and thought process. She must have gone through a lot, and it was not an easy task for her to pick up the sword to kill her father. He also saw her cry over his dying body before he slowly fainted. But just because he understood her, it didn't mean he was okay with it. Fact was she tried to kill him, and even if her motivations were good, it certainly didn't make this experience any better for him. Kana saw how he furrowed his eyebrows. You gave me another chance. Can't you give your daughter another one? You don't have to like her, but at least talk to her. He stared deeply into her eyes. Sigh. Very well. Only because of you. Broly stood up and headed out of the ship and saw Helen quietly watching the flames of the campfire a few hundred meters away. She heard the footstep and saw Broly walk towards her. She stood up and turned towards him. The indifferent cold eyes of Broly saddened her and filled her with guilt. Chapter 89. The Talk. Dad, I am so sorry. Call me Broly. I am not ready to be a father yet. All right, Broly. Her tears were coming up again, but she quickly regained her bearing by breathing in deeply. Broly went ahead and sat down beside her and watched the flames of the fire. Broly, if I knew that you were being possessed, I always felt like you hid something from everyone and I thought you were hiding this anger to the gods, but in the end, I was too blinded by anger. Cacus had killed everyone that I loved. If I knew, I would have never tried to kill you. I hope you can forgive me. What you did takes unbelievable strength. It needs you to be a monster. I wouldn't say I liked what you did, but I as hell would do nothing different than you. You mean, if I knew my daughter would become a murderous cunt who kills everyone I love and care about, I would break her neck as soon as it was being born, throw her in the trash, and be done with it. Helen widened her eyes as she heard that. You are way more brutal than I remember. Broly looked at her and snorted. Humph. Do you want to know what I really think? What I was really upset about? Of course, please. Yes, being wanted dead is a shitty experience. Well, I actually like being wanted dead, to see them despair as they are hopeless against me, But I hate it if I am the one that is absolutely powerless against my opponent and only death awaits me. Especially if I was on a vacation and was about to get a wish being granted to me. But what I hated the most was that I was being beaten up by my own daughter and that you don't fucking celebrate your victory. Huh. What huh? What you did was fucking badass. You saved the fucking multiverse and saved my ass from being controlled. But instead of fucking showing it off, you were sulking here, wondering if I would forgive you. But you almost died. So, fucking what? I hate being murdered, but I am also the same guy who almost kills himself by training every day. Take some pride that you were able to defeat the legendary Super Saiyan. Helen smiled faintly as she heard those words. You were always good at cheering me up, even though you still resent me. Broly rolled his eyes. Of course, I still resent you. You bloody brat almost killed me. This especially doesn't mean you are allowed to be sulking around and play the fucking victim card. Boo-hoo, my dad, I tried to kill, doesn't like me. As soon as you go back into your timeline, you will revive your dad and you have your happy end anyway. Maybe you were right. I just haven't seen you for a long time and I just didn't want you to hate me. Yeah, alright, let's talk about how you are going to repay me. Repay you? Yeah, you can ask for forgiveness with your dad, I don't care, but you still have to make it up to me that you almost butchered me. Understood? How should Dash? Understood? Yes, sir. Helen suddenly sprung up and saluted. Oh my, seems like I didn't slack of training my kids. You are going to teach me everything I taught you, starting with the teleportation with the gods. Understood. I heard you came here with newly appointed gods of destruction. Let me guess, they are picking up the Super Dragon Balls to make the wish, right? Yes, I wanted to stay here, waiting for you to wake up. They will probably come back in a few months. Oh right, how long have I been out? About a month. We even fed you healing capsules, but there was a lot of damage. A month, huh? Until your friends come back you are going to teach me, starting from today, but first I need something to eat. I am starving. Broly stood up and flew into the air. He looked around with his life force vision and quickly locked onto something. He instantly disappeared and reappeared with a dead dinosaur in his hands. He threw it on the ground and looked at Helen. You are the cook from now on. After saying that he turned around and headed towards his ship. Is something wrong? He turned his head and looked at Helen who seemed to be contemplating about something. Don't you want to know about your other kids and major events in the future? No. I don't want to hear any spoilers. Of course, techniques and insights are welcome. Why not? Because it's more fun this way. Besides, your future isn't mine anymore. He casually responded, after saying that he left her standing as he entered his ship. As soon as he entered, turned into a room with the window open and was greeted by 3 girls hastily sitting down at the desk. Eavesdropping, are we? I.e. Oh my god. Cough. I mean, you are already back. How was your conversation? Kana quickly said. Broly only rolled his eyes as a response. Not bad, Broly. Saying that she should be proud of what she did, but that you still resented her and that she needs to make it up to you, would make her know that you supported what she did but also convey your feelings about almost being killed. Her way to get even with you would be to teach you all the techniques, but it is more of a way to spend more time with you and to calm her down. So, when she returns to her timeline, she would have a clear mind and could stand proudly in front of her father.
Guess.
I just want to get her techniques and beat her up afterwards. Obviously, he didn't say that out loud. Aaliyah didn't say anything and just stroked his hands. They headed to their relax room and talked about the things that happened in the month Broly was unconscious. It seems like they woke up after Broly was put into a healing chamber. They tried to attack Helen and the 2 gods, but were quickly immobilized. Helen explained her story, which made the 3 calm down a bit. Seeing Broly slowly recovering also improved their anxiousness. The gods shortly left afterwards with Helen staying behind. In the beginning, the girls avoided Helen, but she insisted on training the 3 and gave them some tips to use their energy more efficient. They trained together in the gravity chamber and spend most of their time there. During that time, they quickly understood that Helen was a very kind and sensitive person, unlike the first impression she gave them. They were also visited by some Earthlings, but because of their cloaking device and their ability to hide ki, they weren't able to find them. After chatting with them for a while, Helen called them for dinner. They quickly devoured the dinosaur, and the girls asked Helen how Broly would be in the future. The version she described was less violent as the Broly now, and not nearly as obsessed with training as now. He was also more majestic as the king of the Saiyans, but Broly stopped them from going further into that direction. Broly had only asked her one vague question: if something happened to his friends that he couldn't fix. To be honest, he would have wanted to know if any of his friends died in the future, but since he knew about the Dragon Balls, he was only concerned if they were erased or something in a similar fashion. Helen had good news, but of course she couldn't guarantee things as the future has been changed the moment she stepped into this timeline. While they were talking, Helen secretly took a few glances at him and Zangya. As perceptive as they were, they noticed this but didn't say anything. It was clear that she still needed some time to adapt seeing them again. After a while, The night slowly broke in and Broly told the others to gather in the training chamber. As long as Helen was around, he would use her to adapt to go against someone stronger. It would be too much of a waste to ignore this perfect sparring partner. While fighting her after he first woke up, he noticed that his body somewhat remembered how Kakus used the energy in his body. He now wanted to try not to actively guide his energy, but let his body do it for him. With this, he was able to slightly imitate Kakus usage. Although he was far from using his legendary state to go against Super Saiyan Blue, every step would take him closer. Chapter 90. Revenge. For months later, Broly stepped out of the training chamber. He took a shower and went outside the ship. He walked towards what looked like a bigger version of the time machine from Trunks. He was surprised to see Dispo and Majikeo as he knew them from the Tournament of Power. They were contestants from the other universes. They looked rather relaxed as they talked with the others in the group. Kana, Aaliyah, and Zangya were saying their goodbyes. Helen saw Broly approach them. She walked up to him, and without saying anything, she hugged him. "Thanks, Dad." She smiled at him before turning around. Suddenly, Broly appeared in front of her and slammed his fist inside her stomach. Her body was instantly sent flying parallel to the ground. Before she could rebalance herself, she was sent into the air. A key beam followed her and detonated on impact. Smoke covered the sky. A blue shimmer could be faintly seen through the air. Helen turned Super Saiyan Blue to block the attack. She looked at her father, who was standing still on the ground. She slowly landed a few meters in front of him. "I will be coming to your timeline and beat you and your father up, remember that." "Of course." Helen couldn't help but smile brightly. "See you around, kiddo." Broly crossed his arms as he said his goodbye. Helen gave Zangya a last hug and whispered something into her ear which caused Zangya to blush. She jumped into the time machine with Dispo and Majikeo. The hatch closed, and the machine slowly flew into the sky before quickly vanishing from sight. "Sigh, she already left so soon," Aaliyah said out loud. Obviously, she has a wish to be granted and her family is there and not here. Instead of talking, how about we train some more dash? Suddenly a gigantic key was being released a few thousands of kilometers away. It is already time for their appearance? Come, we have an old friend to visit. Broly shot into the distant sky. The girls quickly followed him. They were confused about who this old friend might be. "Don't we have to hide anymore?" Kana asked Aaliyah. "Apparently not. Maybe Kakarot has returned?" "Maybe. But this key, where did I sensed it before?" Kana's eyes suddenly flashed. She accelerated and quickly caught up to Broly. They quickly arrived at a wasteland with rock formations similar to where Broly and Helen had fought. They looked down as they saw a figure kill some people, who appeared to be soldiers. Aaliyah and Zangya joined them shortly afterwards. On the side was a big circular spaceship with legs piercing into the ground, but this was not the first what caught their eyes. They saw two frost demons talking to a guy with purple hair. Suddenly the guy powered up and his ki started rising. The dead bodies on the ground were thrown into the sky by the rising energy. The earth trembled and broke apart. The guy's hair pointed into the sky. His body began to shine in a golden hue, and his hair turned golden. A Super Saiyan? Aaliyah and Kana were shocked. They couldn't believe there was another Super Saiyan beside them. Although Kana was shocked, she quickly focused on one of the frost demon, whose body was partly replaced by metal components. She squinted her eyes for a moment before she asked Broly, "Is that frost demon Frieza?" "Yes. Next to him is his father King Cold, and the guy is called Trunks. He's half Saiyan, half human." Broly seemed to be pondering about something as he said that. Kana's eyes flashed, but she didn't move. They hovered in the air as they saw the spectacle on the ground. They saw how Frieza shot a ki blast at Trunks, but it didn't do anything to him. Frieza flew into the sky and created a sun made out of ki and threw it at Trunks, who was easily able to receive it. Frieza followed up with a ki blast and detonated the sun. Trunks escaped out of harm's way and started an attack further away. Frieza jumped out of the way and Trunks headed straight at him with his sword ready to swing. "Kana, go and have some fun," Broly said as he saw the fight progress to this state. "Understood." Kana disappeared from the sky and reappeared between Trunks and Frieza. Trunks was already mid-swing and couldn't stop anymore, while Frieza was frozen in place out of shock. Kana stopped the sword by pinching the blade, while kicking Frieza right in the stomach, sending him crashing into the ground. Trunks was shocked as he realized that he couldn't move the sword as it was clutched by this mysterious woman. She finally let go and Trunks distanced himself quickly. He observed her. He widened his eyes as he saw something wrapped around her waist. "A tail? You are a Saiyan." Kana didn't bother with him as she looked down at the crater. As soon as she saw something moving, she disappeared from Trunks' sight. Suddenly screams of pain could be heard from the ground. "No, this wag can't be happening. You filthy monkey, yeah." Trunks was completely flabbergasted. How is this possible? How could a Saiyan be so strong, and why wasn't she ever mentioned by Mom? He looked at the ground and saw how she broke every limb and bone inside the remaining body of Frieza. It wasn't a fight. Frieza was just straight up beaten to death. Trunks saw how King Cold was preparing to attack from the sidelines. Just as he was about to move, a 2.2-meter tall guy appeared right in front of him. Without saying anything, he kneed Trunks right in the stomach. Trunks couldn't even scream as his breath was completely gone. He bent forward, while holding his stomach. Kana finally killed Frieza by ripping off every limb and incinerated his limbless body. King Cold didn't underestimate the Saiyan anymore, and a humongous ki started pouring out of his body. His body started shining brightly. A huge explosion created a giant crater and slowly revealed a tall figure in the middle with white skin and purple crystals on his shoulder and head. He had transformed into what resembles the final form of Frieza. Broly was surprised as he wouldn't have thought that King Cold had a final form. In the series, he was only shown with that previous body until he was easily killed by Trunks. He looked at King Cold with his life force vision and saw that it was rapidly depleting. It seems like this transformation was putting immense pressure on his body and shortens his lifespan by quite a bit. No wonder King Cold hoped that Trunks' strength came from his sword. With the rate his lifespan is decreasing, he will be dead soon even if Trunks hadn't killed him. Broly felt the ki King Cold released and only shook his head. After killing Frieza, Kana's attention was solely on King Cold. Her eyes suddenly changed into a green color, and her hair turned golden. What, another one? King Cold was shocked. Kana disappeared and directly pierced King Cold's chest with her arm. She didn't use a ki blade but just drove her arm in like it was nothing. The difference in strength was obvious. How could this be? How are you so strong? Cough. Cough. King Cold was spewing out blood as he shakily backed away. Strong? I am not strong. You are just pathetically weak. You just barely even hit a billion. After saying that, Kana waved her arm and directly looped off King Cold's head. It hadn't touched the ground before it was pulverized by a ki attack. The body was quickly disposed of as well. She then turned back into her base. Trunks couldn't believe what was happening. The ki the female Saiyan shortly released as a Super Saiyan was too high for him to grasp. Another Super Saiyan appeared out of nowhere. If he guessed right, she could easily kill those androids that terrorized him for years. He readjusted himself after being hit and looked at the guy who was looking at the slaughter. Trunks couldn't help but feel that this man was even stronger than the woman, even though he didn't release any energy. The man looked at him and grinned. Trunks felt like he would die a torturous death after seeing that grin. Suddenly, another two women appeared beside the man. At this point, Trunks was already sweating buckets. He just couldn't understand who these people were and where they came from. He felt like an animal in the zoo as he was being observed. Zangya yawned, while Aaliyah observed Trunks. Why is Broly staring at him so intensely? Does he hide more power, but why would he be hit so easily? Aaliyah thought. So, this is future Trunks. He is smaller than expected. Wait, I am over 2 meters now. Of course, HE is small for main. Who are you? Trunks unconsciously took a step back. Hee, I am Broly.